It's Tuesday, November 28th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show. It is a hell of a day to talk ball, and joining me to do just that is the man himself, Andy Behrens. Andy, what's going on, buddy?
It is a hell of a day to talk ball. We're coming off a week with some fantastic games, some not so fantastic games. You know what I realized actually this morning is that, and I realize sometimes on this particular recurring episode of the podcast, sometimes I may come across as a little bit impatient with people. But if this podcast, if the Panic Meter podcast prevents even one person from directly reaching out to a player to criticize their performance, then we have done our job. The whole Justin Jefferson episode this past week, which I don't think we've talked about, has made me so that's terrible. This is absolutely terrible. We chased that man off Twitter. We chased that man off social platforms. That is horrific that has happened, because he's like a really fan engaged guy. And anyway, if this concept, this panic meter concept, prevents even one person from yelling at a player on some social platform, I feel good about it.
Yeah, that is actually a great point, and I'll echo the sentiments. I've talked to Justin Jefferson multiple times. He's great. He's awesome. He's super engaging, and he's one of the best players in football. And the fact that one of the best players in football at this point in his career is still pretty engaging with the media is great. And hopefully that doesn't change that, especially hopefully he doesn't see Matt Harmon from Yahoo Fantasy and is I enjoyed talking to that guy, but I'm not going on his show anymore because of fantasy. That sucks. Here's the deal. You do that stuff, you're a total lunatic. You're a complete whack job, and there's just there's no helping you. There's no saving you if you tweet at players, message players, anything like that. Number one, because it's just ridiculous. And the main reason, even if you want to take if you message them mean things, you're just a bad person, period. But the real, and I say this as, I talk to players, I do a show with an NFL player who we'll be talking about on this episode for sure. It's not like a Justin Jefferson decision. You're gonna message Justin Jefferson on Tuesday and he's gonna be yeah, I'm coming back actually on Monday. It's a joint decision with a lot of factors involved. So just have some sense. Okay. Yeah. Great point, Andy. Please send in your problems to us, even though we can't really help you. Send them to us. Don't send them to the players.
Yes, please. If we can just be the gatekeepers for all that, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, we will take that, even if sometimes it's well, okay, we don't really agree with you that you're panicking about this, but we understand where you're coming from. I've said previously with the Ridley stuff, right? I'm just looking at the box scores as just a regular fantasy player, and this is tough to trust. So we're doing our best here on the People's Panic Meter episode to take care of all that and maybe be some gatekeeping for some frustration that you do not need to be directing to the players who are actually on the field doing this whole thing. We're going to get to the People's Panic Meters we do every week here on the podcast. We will get to the coping corner as well. I've got a screaming submission I'm ready to get in there. But before we do that, we do have a little bit of news here that's kind of coping corner adjacent, because Frank Reich has been put in the coping corner by David Tepper. David Tepper has fired Frank Reich. This is now 2 in-season firings back-to-back, both for the Panthers and for Frank Reich. David Tepper fired Matt Rule in the middle of last season. He fires Frank Reich in the middle of this season. Frank Reich gets fired by the Colts in the middle of last season. He gets fired by the Panthers in the middle of this season, his first with the team. He doesn't even make it 1 year. He doesn't even make it as long as Urban Meyer. Urban frickin' Meyer doesn't even make it as far as Urban Meyer did with his first year and only year with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Frank Reich told Scott Fowler, a longtime Panthers writer, this is probably the end of his NFL journey. Yeah, did you see what the guy looked like by the end of the job? I'd be ready to bounce out of there too. By the way, he's still collecting all these checks I just talked about. He's still making money from David Tepper forever. Frank Reich has got it set. Okay. So Frank Reich is good, but he's out of the job. The interim coach, Chris Tabor, also made the decision to fire Josh McCown, the quarterback coach, Deuce Staley, the assistant head coach and running backs coach. So 2 big figures there out the door. Jim Caldwell is going to take a bigger hand because he's on this coaching staff. Is going to take a bigger hand with the offensive play calling and everything. Thomas Brown, the offense coordinator, is going to remain the play caller. What a disaster. Absolute disaster Andy. I mean, we could just call it the Carolina corner for the coping corner now at this point.
It is an absolute disaster. I believe I have this right. I don't think Frank Reich even made it to the end of Matt Rule's contract, let alone his own contract, right? Like they're paying multiple guys now. Like this is just I don't know a way to frame this other than like you can't fire your way to success in the NFL. And like assuming there's yet another coach next season for the Panthers, that's 7 under the watch of David Tepper.
Assuming. I like you say, assuming somebody wants to take that job, which somebody will still.
Like each of the last 2 years, 2 coaches, we're going on like number 7 since 2018 next year, which is just like that you can't win that way. And I realize that's a reflection of not winning, but it all has to reset absolutely every time. Like they just need to, I mean, I see no sign that they're going to be willing to do it, but obviously they need to settle on some competent adult with a system in which Bryce Young can just sort of swim for 3 years, right? And get comfortable and build on what happened the year before and the week before. I see no sign that they're going to do that. Like this just feels very 1970s Steinbrenner-y, and they're just going to fire coaches on a whim. Not that, like, obviously they didn't have a lot of success, but they weren't set up for success either. There's a lot of glaring problems with this team. This is no way to go about your business in the NFL. This is not. They didn't make progress today.
No, they did not. And look, Frank Reich was not doing a good job. Like that is true. While also what you said is true, that this was not a situation that was set up to succeed, based on the fact like the worst kept secret in the NFL is that those coaches all wanted CJ Stroud. I mean, they all did. And whether they said it or not, like that's the reality of the situation is they wanted CJ Stroud, but the owner wanted Bryce Young. And you know what the next coach is going to have to want? Bryce Young. So now like you're taking a job where guys have been fired mid-season back-to-back years. You know there's not a long leash here, which, hey, in the long run, okay, I know these jobs are one of 32. They're really well-paying jobs. You get paid a hell of a lot more if you're a head coach, especially if you're David Tepper's head coach. You get paid a lot of money. Both these guys have been paid a lot of money. And then you get to just not even work. You just get to get paid to do nothing. So it's not the worst job in the world from that perspective. But it's not an appealing job because you know you're going to get fired. You know it's not going to be well set up. You know David Tepper's going to have these accountability meetings with you, but not with the man in the mirror, which is himself, who's the real architect of all this dysfunction. And on top of all that, your team's going to have the first overall pick, but you don't have that.
Yeah.
You don't have any real promising offensive players, and you now have to make David Tepper's mistake. It is a mistake to have taken Bryce Young first overall, even if it wasn't a mistake at a time. It's now a mistake because of how CJ Stroud's playing. But that person, whoever takes that job, is now going to have to take it on the premise of, I'm going to make your mistake look better, which is a rough place to be.
Right. And I don't know who they have their eye on. I don't know if it's Ben Johnson. We don't know yet who the like absolute darling coaching candidate is going to be once we get to, January, February. But anybody who's got their pick of jobs ain't picking this one. Like not having perhaps the top overall pick next year, just a killer. You're gonna have to go the Jacksonville route from a couple of years ago in order perhaps to get top end talent, right? You're just going to have to outspend everybody to do it, which they probably can, but it's not an environment that people are going to flock to. And I don't see how you're going to attract the coach that you necessarily want. It's just an overall rough situation. And this all sticks to Bryce Young too. So I think he can, I don't know that Bryce Young can ever be what CJ Stroud already is, but I think he can be better than what we've seen. You give him a better offensive line, you get him some like actual downfield threats, a better receiving core. Like it can work to some extent. They're just so far away.
They're so far away. Ben Johnson turned them down last year for an interview.
Yeah.
What do you think has happened in the last 365 days at the time that this will actually happen? 365 days that would make him want to, I'll change my mind. I'm going to go ahead and let me give the Panthers a shot now. Again, unless he wants to not work and get paid. That's the only reason you would take this job, is if you want to not work and you want to make money, which, to be fair, I would love to not work and make money, but alas, I am probably not a candidate for the Carolina Panthers head coaching job. So unfortunately, I am not. I'm going to still have to come here to work and do all this stuff. From a rest of season perspective, I know, look, people aren't really counting on any Panthers players in fantasy. I mean, if you have been at any point, you're beyond banged. I think anything is on the table kind of for this team, like personnel stuff. Jonathan Mingo had a 60-yard game, one disastrous non-catch along the sideline, which is, I mean, if you haven't seen it, just look up, Jonathan Mingo on Twitter. It's pretty funny. Maybe they try to get him. I honestly can't even comprehend like what the hell he was doing on that play. And I've watched a lot of weird receiver stuff over the years. Maybe they try to get him more in the Adam Thielen role because that's really the only role that Jonathan Mingo was ever going to succeed in. But they've been playing damn Adam Thielen there. I think if you have been relying on Adam Thielen, hopefully we did get a couple submissions to him to the panic meter, which I get. That's actually a legit thing to panic on before the Frank Reich firing. Like the Adam Thielen stuff was fraudulent to begin with, right? Andy, I talk about this all the time. Yeah. Okay, your receiver is producing like crazy in the box score, but the film doesn't match that level of production. If you think Adam Thielen was ever playing like a top 10, top 5 receiver this year, like give me some of whatever you're smoking. And two, if the offense stinks, I really don't care about that production. And this is one of the worst offenses we've ever seen.
Yeah, that is kind of the thing for our purposes here. There's not, you can't even come up with a list of players that you should be panicking about. And Thielen is probably the only panic-worthy player. Nobody else has risen to the level that causes any sort of great fantasy concern. Chuba Hubbard has had some nice workloads along the way, I guess. Thielen has mostly been a workload-related phenomenon, but he's got, he's also, to his credit, he had more left in the tank than certainly I gave him credit for entering the season. But fantasy-wise, I would assume that most of the best teams in any fantasy league are not actually mixed up with Carolina Panthers. So this is not a huge concern for people who are still listening to fantasy football podcasts at this late date.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with the Carolina Panthers. I mean, I know we've seen disaster level. I mean, we've seen bad quarterbacks get turned around. Tua wasn't great to start his career, and then Mike McDaniel comes in and saves him. There have been other examples, but I don't know. I don't get the same vibe. Like the baseline for Tua was so much higher than what the baseline has looked like for Bryce Young. So I don't know. We'll see if they can recruit, a Mike McDaniel type of hotshot who wasn't the top coaching candidate that year. Right. We'll see if they can stumble upon that in Carolina. But for now, it's just one of the most mismanaged, just like hideous operations in the entire NFL. And hey, ownership matters. Okay. Like that is, we don't talk about it enough, certainly from a fantasy perspective, but like you can be sitting there in the summer and be like, well, Miles Sanders, you know what? Like he's going to catch some passes because this coaching staff wants him to. And like Adam Thielen's going to get a lot of volume. And the last year the Panthers run game was pretty good. And then, oh, well, you know what? They have a bad owner and could tank the entire operation. Like that stuff does happen. Okay. So with that, let's get into our week 12 People's Panic Meter. And let's start with the Coping Corner, Andy. Reminder, Coping Corner, Pollard's Playground, which, by the way, let's make this clear about the Coping Corner. Just because we put somebody in the Coping Corner does not mean that they are never going to have good games again. Mm-hmm. We famously put the Falcons offense in the Coping Corner, and Bijan Robinson scored 2 touchdowns coming out of his bye. Drake London looked awesome. We put Ramondre Stevenson in the Coping Corner. He's had a few decent performances. Obviously, Tony Pollard scored in back-to-back games. Christian Watson is still capable of making big plays. It's not that they're never going to do anything again. They're just not going to be, when we put them in the Coping Corner at that point, what they were imagined to be heading into the season. That's why you're past panic. You're just at coping. And I would say the names we put in here, Stevenson, Watson, definitely Dameon Pierce. That was number 1 with the bullet, Dameon Pierce. Falcons offense, Tony Pollard. Washington Commanders offense. I feel comfortable still with all of those names. You, Andy?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to have new talking points necessarily on any of these guys, right? Like, it was perhaps it was a little bit aggressive to put whole teams in here, but but they're connected to problems that are not going to go away. It would be exciting if the Falcons thing like fixes itself and they really are like just all in on their two or three best playmakers for the rest of the season. I hope that's the case.
Just
Um,
two.
yeah,
Just two.
it would appear to be just two. Yeah.
Whether we somehow retroactively remove Bijan Robinson and Drake London from the coping corner, like Kyle Pitts can sit in all three of the seats. Okay.
I think that's totally fair. Yeah. Actually, that's a. Do we even have a process for that? Do we have a process for elevating somebody out of the playground back into the pool for panic? I don't know.
I think the only one I'm a little like about is Bijan Robinson. But here's the thing. Like, and here's why we're not going to do it today. If he gets 12 to 10 carries next week and like doesn't have a big passing game role, I'm not putting this into the air. Like, I don't know if I should knock on wood or what, but you cannot be surprised based on how the way the season has gone. If Desmond Ridder turns in a nightmare performance and Drake London 7 targets instead of going for 90 yards and a touch, go for literally 7 yards. We've seen that stuff before. Okay. So I'm comfortable with those are the two guys that make me a little like, I don't know, but they're already not what we expected them to be, for the vast majority of the season at this point.
Yeah, this is a pretty good point because I feel like the touchdowns from Bijan this past week obscure the fact that like Tyler Algier is still involved. We have not arrived at a point where like it's just a one-man backfield, right? Like Tyler Algier just had 64 yards on the ground. Like he's still a thing. CPAT still weirdly a thing. So that hasn't gone away. So like we could be coming off a week where Bijan does all the same stuff he does, except he doesn't find his way to the end zone, and then you're probably panicked.
Yeah, and like a couple of these guys, again, it's not as if they were never going to have good games again. Like I've seen a couple of people being like, you know what, Ramondre Stevenson, he could win your league down the stretch. Like Christian Watson, he's got a great schedule. He could be a league winner down the stretch. Whose 10th place team is now going to win the league because of those two guys that they drafted? Okay, it's too late. Like, these guys are not useless NFL players. If they were useless NFL players, we wouldn't be talking about them on a fantasy football podcast.
Right.
Like they were just a little overrated and overdrafted to end the season or to start the season. And they gave you mountains of evidence of that. And now we're seeing a couple little molehills here at the end of the season. Be like, oh yeah, right. Christian Watson, you can still win as a vertical receiver when he catches the ball. Like that happens.
But Watson is particularly funny to me. Watson is not even close to being the number one receiver on his team right now. And eventually we'll get around to talking about Jaden Reed and pickups who people still have not picked up. But he's not number 2 either. He's just a guy who's coming off a good game.
All right. With that, who is your suggestion to add to the coping corner this week?
I don't feel like you'll accept it. But I'm gonna throw it out there anyway. I'm out of new material on Lamar Jackson. I know we're gonna talk about him today because somebody even sent in a screenshot of his game by game fantasy performance. So we got to talk about him. And in fact, I actually like as we look ahead at Lamar's schedule. I think what we actually need Lamar to have are games where they just need to keep the pedal to the floor. And I think they've got that coming up. So like, I actually think it's going to be a pretty nice December for Lamar. But I don't know what to tell people who are unsatisfied with the sort of roller coaster nature of his season. I acknowledge that he has had several weeks where it's just like 15 points and it doesn't feel like it's helping you. He has had like 4 spike weeks where he's almost single-handedly wins you a fantasy matchup. And like, I don't know, here we are, end of November. He's like the QB5 or the QB6, depending on your scoring system. He's gonna rush for 800 yards. He's gonna set a bunch of career highs in the passing stats. And I can't make you feel any better about it, but he's basically delivered at ADP relative to the other quarterbacks.
All right, I actually might be willing to take Lamar and put him in the coping corner. I might be willing to take your submission to accept it.
I should also add that like we're not going to have to talk about him next week because like he's going into a bye. He's one of these late bye week guys. So like we are going to get a week off of Lamar. So perhaps we could save this for a couple weeks down the road. But
okay, on that note, yeah, let's save Lamar because we are going to have a submission on him in the People's Panic Meter, and I'll just move that one to the top so we can get to it faster. But my submission for the Coping Corner is the Seattle Seahawks passing game.
That's good. That's really good.
Perhaps you have forgotten because it feels like 1,000 years ago that any of those Thanksgiving games occurred, and certainly people may have been in their most haziness for whatever reason during the 49ers Seahawks game because it was the latest one. But that was yet another disappointing performance from the Seahawks passing game, and I get it. The 49ers defense is very good. It's a top level unit. We can't be surprised that they thrashed the Seahawks because the 49ers defense is good. And frankly, like, I'm just done hoping that the Seahawks passing game is going to give us what we thought it would this year. And frankly, I probably should have been done a long time ago. Making matters worse, the Seahawks get Dallas. They go to Dallas this weekend. Then they go to San Francisco, the team that just thrashed them. Then they get the Eagles. Maybe there's a moment against the Eagles because, you know, that pass defense is a little broken right now. So there's that. The Titans in week 16, the Steelers in week 17. That's a matchup that could go either way. But like, what have you seen from the Seahawks offense, the passing game in particular, that makes you think they're going to exploit that Eagles or Titans matchup, or that they can be one of these teams that puts up a big number on the Steelers? Because we've at least seen that before. We haven't seen anything like that from this group, whether it's Geno not playing at the level he played at last year, whether it's just he's not healthy right now. I think that's another thing. Whether it's just like there's not enough meat on the bone on this offense to support any of these receivers hitting their ceiling. If they still have that ceiling in their range of outcomes, it's just not there. Like I think the Seahawks offense is a passing game in particular, because I mean, even Zach Charbonnet is starting right now, and I don't feel great about playing him in any of those matchups. Like I think the Seahawks passing game is made for the Coping Corner.
Yeah, this is a great submission, and I feel a little bad that I didn't come with it as well because this morning I was just a little bit panicked myself on DK Metcalf, who is a receiver on one of my favorite, one of those, you know, like we probably both have a ton of fantasy teams, and you just get attached to certain ones. And one of the teams that I am most attached to happens to have DK Metcalf, and it's just like, I'm not feeling great about the next couple weeks. I'm not feeling great about the Dallas matchup. I'm not feeling great about another Niners matchup. Like, he's coming off a game in which the volume was absolutely there. Like normally you give DK Metcalf 9 targets. I'm feeling pretty good about my potential outcome. And I got 32 scoreless yards out of it. This is a tough road over the next 2 weeks. And then you're right. Like, even when they get the great matchups, I'm not brimming with confidence. It has been problematic that both Lockett and Metcalf have basically been on the midweek injury report all year. And then they get, you know, hey, they're good to go. They're clear by the end of the week. But they're both clearly playing through some stuff, and it's been like a medley of injuries with both players. So, you know, between their issues, Geno's various issues, this is a good call, and I am all for immediately waving them into the Coping Corner.
I feel like there, and you know, maybe Colin can remember it because I definitely don't, but I feel like there was a stat from the Stat Nerd Thursday show last week, the Stat Nerd / binge stream skip preview. It's this one. I've got it here from ESPN Stats and Information. The Steelers offense averages 15 points per game. This is coming into this past week. 28th in the NFL. That's more than 5 fewer points per game than the next closest team with a winning record. The Seahawks at 20.2 offensive points per game rank 18th in the NFL overall. And this was after I had said earlier that week that the Seahawks offense feels kind of Steeler-ish, where we like the receivers to a certain degree. We had some much higher hopes for the quarterback than we probably thought, or than he's reached coming into this year. They have kind of a confusing backfield. And it's like, oh man, look at this spot and the Seahawks, like, these players are better, I think, Shane Waldron's a good coordinator. Matt Canada was famously fired. So there's a little bit of a difference here, a little bit of disconnect. But like also, at the same time, like defensive head coach that we all agree is a good coach, but like, is he kind of limiting things? There's a lot of similarities between the Seahawks and the Steelers. And like, my God, I think that's enough reason to put them in the coping corner.
Yeah, the Steelers are actually going to be a good candidate for this in future weeks too, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I mean, if I think they should have been there from like week 1. Like whenever the preseason was over, that was when the Steelers went to the coping corner. All right, so with that, we're putting Geno Smith, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. All those guys are officially in the coping corner. And with that, let's move into our Week 12 submissions. No submissions to the mailbag this week, which is emblematic of a couple of things. One, maybe people are still hungover from Thanksgiving. 2, we are kind of getting to like, all right, we're out of rope with panic. Like panic is what are we doing here? I mean, there's really nothing to panic about. Like your team is what it is and we're headed into it. So we might be reimagining some things with this podcast in future weeks. But for now, we'll take our submissions from social media, starting with at FFB Scott, my buddy Josh Scott, who's done some work. I'm saying this so that Andy's not mean to you particularly. Done some nice work with me at Reception Perception, actually. So Josh says, I'm not saying it's panic, but it's definitely stress/frustration. I know all about the down quarterback year. I also know that Andy Behrens didn't want to hear it in previous weeks, but you can't tell me this is what you were hoping for from a first-tier quarterback. Lots of games less than 20 points here from Lamar Jackson. Josh literally sent in his Yahoo. So shout out to good job. His Yahoo game log here, his fantasy point game log. All right. So Andy, let us have the Lamar Jackson discussion.
Yeah. I'll tell you, what has me feeling good here. And I appreciate that. I certainly appreciate the game log, right? I get it. Like there's a bunch of totals in the mid-teens, high teens with the occasional spike week. And it has resulted in Lamar being, again, he's played to his ADP. I don't know what to tell people about that. Like probably took him at like QB4, QB5. He's really close to that on the season. I won't call it a complication, but like one of the things that I think is factored into his season is this defense being so damn good. That's definitely been like, I don't know, that Charger game was never like, it's not like they raced out to some huge lead or anything like that, but it also never felt competitive to me. I never really felt like the Chargers were in it. There's a lot of that against the Ravens. Obviously, this team's commitment to running the ball when they get inside, when they get in goal-to-go situations is a thing. It's just that Lamar overall within the context of this season just has not been, I don't know, some of this might come down to like how I'm feeling about the teams that I have with Lamar on them, and they're all good. Like Lamar has not been a problem for me personally, so maybe I'm projecting that out onto the people a little bit. One of the things that I thought was interesting, we were talking about a little bit pre-show, is that Patrick Mahomes is not having a fundamentally different season in terms of just like fantasy totals from Lamar Jackson. Like Mahomes has also had a couple of big spike weeks that account for a lot of the scoring. And then it's a bunch of games that are like in the mid-teens. If he's over 20, it's like 20 point something. He has a game with single digit points to his credit this year, right? Like it hasn't been the dream Patrick Mahomes season. And I don't know why I'm not seeing more complaints about him, honestly. I think probably part of the reason is that oftentimes with Mahomes, there is so clearly some other chief to blame. It's MVS dropping a ball. It's Kadarius Toney dropping every ball that came his way, right? Like there is clearly a culprit on the field that is not Patrick Mahomes. But again, that's kind of the deal with Lamar Jackson too. It's just it's more about team context. And it's about what the Ravens need than it is about like the receiving core flagrantly failing him. There was one game that was like a super drop filled game. I forget if it was like 5 or 6 drops, right? Everybody got involved.
That would be week 1. Oh, no, you're thinking Ravens was the Steelers one. The Steelers one, yeah.
Yes, yeah. And it was like everybody had a hand in it. Everybody had some glaring drops. Bateman had a terrible one. Andrews had a couple. Like it was bad. But it had like not every week has gone that way. But again, he's going to finish with like 800 rushing yards. He's going to set a bunch of career highs in passing stats. Like, this is just plainly not a bad Lamar Jackson season. It's just that it's not, he's not averaging 30 points per week, and he's a player who we've seen do that. And he's also not giving it to you like in neat, 24-point chunks. You're getting 15, and then you're getting 16, and then you're getting 35, and then you're getting 15 again and 16. And I get people don't like that. But it's not so different from what Mahomes is doing. And there's only one guy in the league, Jalen Hurts, who gets to start every week with like a free 1-yard rushing touchdown, and then his stats build from there. So he's been the only guy, I think, by the time we get to the end of the season, who's really going to differentiate himself. The one ray of hope that I intended to give Jackson managers is that when we get into December and like you really can't lose, like it's all must-win weeks, this won't sound great, but he's got Jacksonville, he's got the Niners, and then he's got the Dolphins in weeks 15 through 17. And I feel like more than anything, what we need with Jackson is just a bunch of competitive games. We need the Ravens to have to keep the pedal to the floor through the end of the fourth quarter, and we need scenarios where Lamar Jackson has to make plays throughout. And I feel like we're going to get that in December. I'm hopeful that we're going to get that in December. So I think he can actually finish this season by making kind of a lot of fantasy noise.
Yeah, the Ravens are third in point differential right now. Cowboys are first. And we've been complaining about one of the Cowboys players all year long in fantasy because it's just really tough. Like for every player on offense to eat when you're blowing teams out, when you're really winning games that way. And I think you're right to point out the defense. That was going to be something that I said. And honestly, that's true for Mahomes too. Like the Chiefs haven't needed to, they've been able to survive long dry spells on offense because their defense is really, really good. And the Ravens have been able to, sort of kind of to sort of make do with these slower moments or growing pains on offense. And there have definitely been growing pains on this offense. I think by and large, Todd Monken hiring him has been a success. Adding these receivers has been a success. There's just been some growing pains along the way, but they've been able to survive that because your defense is really good and like is a needle moving unit. But you are right that like the box scores for Mahomes, and Lamar are very similar. Each of them have a single digit game. Lamar's was actually week 1. And then Mahomes was 5.6 against Denver. Jackson's gone over 30 points once. Patrick Mahomes has gone over 30 points once. They've gone over 20 points 5 times for Lamar, 4 times for Mahomes. Jackson's had like more 11-point games kind of sprinkled in there, 9.9 games. So he has 2 single-digit point games, does Lamar. So, but the thing here, Andy, is just you bring Lamar Jackson to this segment, and like, yes, we are acknowledging that he is having a better real life season than a fantasy season. And that just is what it is. And sometimes that happens. Okay. It's like no NFL podcast is leading the show with what's wrong with Lamar Jackson, but we're doing it from a right. Cause that sounds insane. You sound like, Shannon Sharp had a thing on that about First Take, and he sounded like a crazy person. Like I'm not saying that the Ravens are having a perfect season or that Lamar is having a perfect season or he hasn't had bad games, but just generally, like Lamar Jackson is not one of the biggest problems in the NFL. He has been an issue in fantasy because of all the things that we just laid out there, and just sometimes it be that way sometimes. And I think that's just like it be that way with Lamar this year a little bit, but a lot of it comes down to the defense. And the real thing is like you bring him to the segment. Okay, well, what do you want us to tell you to do about it? Like, what do you want to do about it? Now you don't want to start Lamar Jackson anymore. Well, okay, you gonna go pick up Gardner Minshew? You want to start Gardner Minshew? Oh, okay, you want to start Russell Wilson and maybe get 150 passing yards per game? Like, it's too late to start CJ Stroud. Okay, he's gone. And even then, Lamar's 18.9 points per game and CJ Stroud's 20.7. I don't think that's making or breaking you. Okay. And CJ Stroud's had bad games. Like, I know Sam Howell is QB4. Okay. I don't care. I'm Sam Howell, whatever. Okay. Good luck if that's what you're going to rely on down the stretch in the fantasy playoffs. So it's like, that's kind of my big thing with this is like, yeah, I'm allowing you to be upset about Lamar getting 15, 14 points, whatever. Just, what do you want to do about it? I don't know.
Yeah, it's listen, I write the pickups column at Yahoo, and the names this week are terrible. And we'll get to some of them a little bit later, but like you threw out Gardner Minshew as a bit of a punchline, but he's literally the quarterback that I blurbed this week, because there's just not, like, among the players who are widely available, like Minshew's it. I don't know what else you're gonna do. You want me to talk you into Jake Browning? I can't. You want me to talk you into Kenny Pickett? I can't. There's just no one else there. And I wouldn't, like, I don't know. There's a handful of leagues where like Jordan Love is available, but that, like, he screams, matchup dependent, fantasy quarterback. And I don't think that's Lamar's situation. And I think it should be obvious to everyone that a ceiling game from Lamar Jackson is just different from most players, right? Like, and that's what'll ultimately sort of make or break your playoff fortunes, is if you get one or two of those when we actually get into December.
Yeah. So final verdict on Lamar. We won't talk about him next week because of his bye. It hasn't always been the way you thought, and it's just, what are you going to do about it? Let's make stream quarterbacks next year. That, like, if you just like that, there you go. Stream quarterbacks next year, and like you can play Derek Carr against the Lions, right? And maybe that will work out for you if that's the way you want to approach the position. One Raven I do think is actually worth worrying about, and we agreed with this to start in our pre-show conversation. At RV604 sends in, wheels fell off the Gus bus. Like, this is the type of player, Andy, people should be sending in, because this might actually come with, like, all right, here's what we do about Gus Edwards going forward. Because, yeah, I mean, the wheels definitely fell off against the Chargers in what should have been a good spot.
Yeah, this is a legit situation, and I just thought it was funny that, like, I credit to this maybe the lone person who sent in Gus Edwards. Gus Edwards should be the number one submission, maybe by a lot. Because Gus was coming off a 5-game stretch in which he scored 9 times. Like, it wasn't a touchdown streak. Like, sometimes we see that, but this was like 2 touchdowns a game. And it appeared for a little while there that, like, if the Ravens got in goal to go situations, they were definitely giving 2 touches to Gus Edwards, and he was probably going to score on one of them. He's a really good player near the goal line, really good in short yardage. We saw that in the Chargers game in limited snaps, but I've kind of buried the lead. He played 15 snaps. He touched the ball 9 times. He played 15 snaps, and Keaton Mitchell sure looked like the number 1 running back to me, right? And like the other thing is, I had certainly talked myself into a scenario where, like, it was going to be Keaton Mitchell and Gus Edwards, and Justice Hill was probably just going to get shoved out of the way. And that didn't happen at all against the Chargers. Like, Justice Hill is still playing and is a fine player. Like, I think Justice Hill has some really nice moments. Like, apparently they're all going to play, and maybe Keaton Mitchell plays more than the other 2. And that's just, like, we can't start players who are only seeing the field for like 13 snaps, 15 snaps. And if that's what Gus is, then he's just going to be kind of a desperation flex. And that is not what he had been for the previous month.
Yeah, I think the Keaton Mitchell thing is fundamentally changing the Ravens backfield. And these guys are not icing out Justice Hill. Like, I think if they had pushed Justice Hill to the side, we would have been fine with Gus Edwards and Keaton Mitchell. That's not what happened. He had a couple like red zone series all to himself, did Justice Hill, which is problematic for Gus Edwards. So, yeah, I mean, he's a guy that's going to get you 13 points if he manages to score a touchdown, or he's going to get you 3.
Yeah.
So that's where he's at this point, which I think is worth panicking on if you had been riding him as like a must start player. All right, next one up here at On the Line FFB says, ooh, uncomfortable. It's your boy, Austin Ekeler. Obviously, we will have a conversation with Austin tomorrow about the current state of the Chargers and the current state of where he's at right now. And, you know, the funny thing about people sending this in is if it's like an uncomfortable conversation. Have you heard Austin ever talk about himself? Like, the guy criticizes his play when he's playing well and scoring a bunch of touchdowns. Like, I think if anybody's going to be critical about Austin Ekeler, it's going to be Austin Ekeler. So I'm sure that's what he will say tomorrow. I think, Andy, from a brass tacks fantasy perspective, and I was talking with our mutual friend, Chris Harris, that guy is still undefeated in the Ekeler League. It is absolutely killing me. Totally disturbing. You
can't let him run the table.
He might run the table. Well, he's not going to, he probably won't win the league because, like, you know, he's riding Christian McCaffrey, and like he'll just randomly stumble on the 1 week where McCaffrey gets a little dinged up and they finally rest him. Like that's just how it goes when you run the table in the regular season. That person never wins the league. I don't even know if I'm gonna have to mail him the trophy. I don't even know if he wants the trophy. He's probably gonna be like, nah, no thanks. And then I'm gonna be stuck with the damn thing. So great. Great. What a wonderful idea we had on this show. Anyways, point being here with Austin, I was having a conversation with Chris this morning about it, and just like he actually has a pretty appealing schedule down the stretch. He's got 2 games against the Broncos, which they're much better defense, but they can still be run on. He's got a game against the Raiders. But man, I mean, even if he is able to like get it going from an individual perspective, this Chargers offense is bad. Like, just period. They have a great quarterback, but they're playing with like, I mean, I've been saying they're playing with 10 guys when Quentin Johnston is on the field. I mean, they might be playing with 9 guys at this point.
Yeah, there's only like 2 places they can reliably go with the football, and everybody they play against knows it, right? I thought John Harbaugh's halftime comments were kind of like as they were going to the break in the game on Sunday night. He was just sort of casually talking about how, oh yeah, we're doubling Keenan Allen because of course we are.
I said the same. I said the same thing, Andy, on the show with Scott last night. It's like, when do coaches ever say that?
You never hear that. Yeah, I was like, wow, that is incredibly candid. like it's obviously it's evident to the other side, like you're not really tipping your hand or anything. It's highly unusual for an NFL head coach to just be that direct about any strategic element, right? Like, but what else would you do? I mean, it's Keenan Allen and Austin Ekeler and literally no one else who stresses you in any way, given the other injuries on that team. And also, I feel like, and you know, I'm sure Ekeler himself is not going to talk about this or at least downplay it, but I feel pretty confident that we're going to get to the offseason and we're going to start to hear and read about the lingering effects of the injury from earlier in the season, right? The ankle sprain. Because he, you know, initially when Austin came back, you know, we're still seeing him limping around on the sideline, clearly uncomfortable, and I just would make all the sense in the world if that has affected him to some extent and is going to continue to, you know, I don't know what that takes away from a player. I don't know. I'm always uncomfortable like putting a percentage of you know fully operational on a player, but I'm not going to be surprised if we eventually hear that is something that bothered him all the way through December.
Yeah, totally. And look, this happens with high ankle sprains all the time. And,
yeah,
you know, he said on the show he has a high ankle sprain, like that when he was out. You know, I think the team was a little cagier about it, but that's just where he was at. And he obviously wanted to come back to play because he doesn't want to be playing like this right now as he's going through like the whole contract dispute and everything like that. But I mean, you know, maybe it's injury, maybe it's not. I don't know if he's going to say that tomorrow. We'll see. We will literally ask him about it and we will see what he says. But yeah, I know, again, like I said, Chris Harris was asking me, do you think he's like somebody you would want to, if you could still trade in the league, like, would you trade for him right now? Just because those matchups down the stretch, it's like, I just feel so bad about this offense. Did you see a quote? Apparently Brandon Staley, and I don't know if this means what it sounds like it means, but Brandon Staley said that it was a coaching staff decision to bench Quentin Johnston, not the medical staff, when he didn't return into that game.
Huh.
Yikes. I mean, it's just so beyond yikes, that whole situation.
Yeah, that's a bad scene. But Johnston's lowest moments have been some of the worst moments from the Chargers season, right? It's just there's no other way to dress that up.
Yeah, I think somebody actually sent in, I am panicked that Quentin Johnston's left hand is defending his right, is playing cornerback on his right hand or something. It's like, okay, well, that's pretty rough. All right, next submission here, another brutal one. At Larry, a bunch of numbers, said Cooper Kupp equals the clear winner of the People's Panic Meter. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people pointed this out, that yesterday the Rams absolutely rip apart the Arizona Cardinals, and you get nothing from Puka Nacua and you get nothing from Cooper Kupp.
Yeah.
Andy, I'll lead this one off because I just watched this game back on film before we got going here. Puka actually, like, Stafford missed him for what would have been a kind of a walk-in touchdown at one point. So, I mean, I'm not too concerned about Puka. Like, I think he'll be fine, but I'm a little concerned with the way Cooper Kupp looks right now. Just in an isolation standpoint, he's never been the best like man coverage beater, just because of, I mean, just who he is stylistically as a player. But I'm pretty concerned with just where he looks at physically. And I mean, you don't need me to tell you that. The guy's been on and off the field all year.
Yeah, he had obviously he suffers the ankle injury a week ago, plays through it. Like this is another case where there's a guy who was limping around a little bit earlier in the game. So he's clearly not 100%. They're clearly not going to tell you exactly where he's at, but it's been mostly an injury story for the entire season with Kupp. They're an interesting team looking forward because I had basically taken Rams out of my plans for the next couple of weeks because they've got the Browns coming up and they've got the Ravens coming up. This doesn't feel like an offense that overcomes any matchup to me. But I'm not totally sure how to view the Browns right now. If Myles Garrett is really dinged, like that's a game wrecker who is perhaps not a game wrecker moving forward. So maybe we have to think about the Browns a little bit differently. Maybe I can warm up to Kyren next week. Maybe we can warm up to Puka Nacua next week. I don't know about Kupp though. I would need to be convinced that he's healthier than I think he is.
Yeah, I think it's pretty troubling. And, he gets 5 targets in this game and they win, right? Like, they win by a lot. They destroy the Cardinals because they have other options to throw the football to. Like, that's another thing, too. This isn't the offense from last year where it was just like, we stink, but like Matthew Stafford's going to pump Cooper Kupp full of like fake stats. And Kupp was playing well. I'm not putting him in the Adam Thielen category where like, okay, that's fake production. But a lot of like gimme throws, like, all right, I can dump the ball off 13 times in the flat to Cooper Kupp, and we're still going to be cooking here from that perspective. But the offense is going to be very good. Now they have Kyren Williams in a run game. Now that he's back, they have Puka. Like Tyler Higbee can pop up every now and again. Like they can do the motion stuff with Tutu Atwell. That's also a little troubling too, that the offense doesn't have to be like just pump Cooper Kupp full of stats.
Yeah, absolutely, huge problem. I thought Atwell looked good. Didn't really see like a ton of targets necessarily, but that's an explosive player on occasion. Higbee with a weirdly big game, right? Probably the biggest game we're going to see out of him. But they do have other guys, to your point. And man, Kyren, a total difference maker. But my overriding concern with Kupp is that he's just gonna be playing through discomfort for the next few weeks, and it's gonna show up in the stats, and we're not gonna they're not gonna tell us a lot about it, like because they're an NFL team and they never tell you the full story about a player's health. But I am probably gonna. I mean, even going into this past week, I think I had him around wide receiver like 25 or 30, something like that. I don't know that I'm gonna get Kupp any higher than that for a while.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this on the show yesterday, but just put a pin on it. Somebody sent in like a bunch of wide receivers, and they were all pretty good options, and one was Cooper Kupp, and I was like, he's the last one I'm thinking about starting here.
Yeah.
And that was going into that week, and I feel worse about him now. So I don't think he's like in the must-start category until we see like another big game. Speaking of the Cardinals, the other team in that contest, we got a couple of Cardinals ones here to talk about. This one comes in from @SRCH_17. I don't even know why I try. A sneaky one would be James Conner. The entire team struggled, but watching the game, Michael Carter popped out of the screen when he touched the ball. I wouldn't be surprised if Carter takes enough snaps away from Conner, making him a TD-dependent RB2. Guy Falk, bunch of numbers, also sends in, with Cousins hurt, Kyler Murray is my only quarterback in my dynasty league, and this performance was definitely panic-worthy. Anyone who didn't watch the game will just look at his stats, almost all in garbage time, and think he did okay. But he wasn't. He was awful today. And look, these are people that should be in the panic meter section, because it's like James Conner was kind of a, you know what, it ain't going to be pretty, baby, but there ain't nobody else, and he's going to be just getting all the volume. The trouble with these guys, like James Conner, Andy, is that there can be someone else like that. And I think there's a little bit of other guys coming up here in Arizona.
Yeah, another problem that we have for Arizona is, number one, they're one of those teams that still has the very late bye, right? They have a week 14 bye, which sucks because a whole bunch of teams are like, I'm in leagues where we got playoff matchups in week 14, right? And like to have a bye hit in week 14 is pretty terrible. So that's awful. They have the Niners coming up. They have the Eagles in week 17. So like there are some very difficult running back spots for James
Steelers
Conner.
this week. I mean, revenge game, but still.
Yeah. Like it's not an easy road. If he were at full health, no worries, no competition, not an easy road at all. And the fact that they have like a basically a fresh-legged Michael Carter, who's a pretty good player, all of a sudden added to the mix is a small concern. I still think that the lead back there is pretty comfortably going to be James Conner, and all the credit in the world to that guy for having a great game against Dallas like a million years ago. I thought he was really good earlier in the season, better than I had expected him to be. But there is plenty of cause for panic here because again, a bye in week 14 is a killer, and then 2 total stay away matchups in the biggest weeks of the season, also a killer.
Yeah, and I think the passing game is a huge problem too. Like, yeah, Kyler Murray's back, but this is still not a good team. This is still the team that everybody thought was going to moonwalk to the number 1 overall pick before they didn't realize that the Panthers were a stone cold disaster. And like, they don't have Michael Wilson. Marquise Brown came into this game banged up. You know, Marquise Brown ends up with 6 catches, 88 yards on 12 targets. Big whoop. They got blown out. Greg Dortch scored a touchdown and did the too small thing. He had the audacity, that little fella had the audacity to do the too small thing to a defender when you're down like 37-6 or whatever. I don't even know what it was at that point. Like, they don't have very many good players other than Trey McBride. And I do think Marquise Brown's a good player. And when Michael Wilson's not out there, it's okay. Now we're back to the Rondale Moore, Greg Dortch thing. And like, that's just not good enough to win football games.
I'm such a sucker for a small guy doing the too small thing. Like, I love that we live in a time where I think in the last 12 months we've seen Patrick Beverley do it in the NBA, and now we've seen Greg Dortch do it in the NFL. I absolutely love that gesture, no matter when it happens.
All right, last one we'll do here before we talk waivers. This one's a little more wide view, so I liked it. At Pedro Serrano 267 sends in, the Lions are lucky they played 3 days ago because people will forget that it's them. Yeah. They're the team we should be panicking on. Their losses, overtime versus the Seahawks, smoked by the Ravens, kind of smoked by the Packers too. Their best win was almost 4 months ago. They have fallen out of the San Francisco-Philadelphia tier, and it's trending further down. Again, I think it's good to talk about these teams because it has been a while ago, since we did see the Lions. And man, that was a pretty concerning performance, Andy. I mean, the defense is a problem, and I thought Goff was really bad in that game.
This is 2 weeks in a row with a really bad version of Jared Goff, I think, is the big concern because we're sort of overlooking the fact that the Bears obviously gagged away the game the previous week in exactly the same fashion that the Bears gag away every game. But for 3 quarters, Jared Goff was bad, like really bad. Salen throws, the interceptions, appeared to me to be mostly about him, misfires. It was really ugly for 3 quarters. That fantasy wise, they're still feeding the right players, right? Like you're not, nobody's complaining about the production from Amon-Ra St. Brown. Laporta found the end zone a week ago. Jahmyr Gibbs has been great. David Montgomery is holding on to value. Like that's all fine. But man, Jared Goff has gone long stretches of these games not looking like a particularly competent quarterback. And then again, he pulled it together in the 4th quarter against the Bears, but being able to do something against the Bears and then being able to make a deep January run in the postseason are 2 very different things. And I think I would agree from a real life perspective. I would not be feeling that comfortable about the Lions right now because they got handled they got kind of worked over by the Packers. Not a particularly good team with a super sketchy quarterback themselves, not a dominant defense, missing some dudes. Like that is just that's not a great performance. Also, like maybe it's early to talk about this, but we don't want Philadelphia to clinch everything too early. Like we kind of needed Detroit to keep winning, and it wouldn't hurt if the Eagles would lose a game and we didn't have to worry about anybody benching players at any point in the season, right? But we might be coming to that.
That is a really good point. Dalton's 49ers need to win this game this week against the Eagles.
Yes.
Number one, so Scott doesn't keep getting obliterated on Twitter, but also for just the sake of all of us here, because Eagles play the Giants, and I know the fighting Tommy DeVitos are on a heater right now, but they play the Giants twice, and the Cardinals in week 16 to 18.
Yeah.
We're going to be in definitely like how hard are we really trying here? How hard are we really going to tush push Jalen Hurts this week? I'd like him to keep pushing that tush, baby, because I have a lot of Jalen Hurts teams.
Yeah, no, we need it, and he'll be making the closing argument on an MVP season, perhaps, and that's important. And they do have the matchup with the Cowboys coming up. Like, there are some tough spots for him, but man, if they've clinched home field with like 2 weeks to go, a lot of us are going to be nervous.
Yeah, a lot of us are going to be nervous. All right, well, people are nervous this week, Andy, because there's a lot of teams on bye. A lot of teams that matter. Okay, the Bills, the Ravens, the Vikings, they've got a lot of important players. The Raiders, they have at least 3 important players. The Giants have Tommy DeVito, the best quarterback in the league, and then your Bears are also on bye. So there's a lot of players that matter on bye this week. So waivers are going to matter this week. So with that, tell us who the top 5 pickups are here in week 13. Man, I can't believe it's week 13.
Matt, I just want to say at the start, I disavow these picks. It's a terrible waiver week. It's a really rough waiver week. A lot of the names that I felt were some of the most important to talk about, like we've talked about before. It's such a bad waiver week that I'm actually just going to start at the top of the list with somebody who I can't believe is still eligible for conversation in this segment. And some of that has to do with the fact that we're late in the year. And if you're you're a non-competitive team, maybe you aren't placing claims anymore, whatever. I get it. But man, Jayden Reed being out there in 53% of Yahoo leagues is wild to me. He's got touchdowns each of the last 3 games. He leads the Packers in receiving yards. He's second on the team in targets and receptions. He's well clear of Christian Watson, who is rostered in many more leagues. Jordan Love's passer rating when targeting Jayden Reed is 117. Compared to a passer rating of like 87 on all other throws, right? Like Jayden Reed has been one of the right answers for the Packers. He's really good. You look at Green Bay's schedule in the weeks ahead, and not every game is necessarily winnable for them, but they are all either pass-friendly game scripts or they're friendly opposing defenses. It's Kansas City, the Giants, Tampa, Carolina, Minnesota. Like, Jayden Reed might have 3 more touchdowns in him. We're probably talking about a player who's going to finish the season with like 9 or 10 TDs. He's looked great. He needs to be rostered in, 80% of Yahoo leagues, something like that. But right now he's sitting out there available in over 50%. My number 2, just because he's coming off a big week, man, Pat Freiermuth had a week unlike, I don't know. How many tight end weeks have we seen that are any better than the one that Freiermuth just gave us? It was season highs in targets. He had 11 targets, 9 catches, 120 yards. Looked great. The Steelers offense, they're still not scoring, but they did put up over 420 total yards, which is not a thing that we expected under Matt Canada. Almost all the bonus yards, fun fact, went to Freiermuth. Like, for all the talk all week about how it's Jaylen Warren time. Man, it's George Pickens time. No, it turns out it was Pat Freiermuth time, at least for a week. So rest of season, can he be a top 10 fantasy tight end, top 8 fantasy tight end? Sure, of course he can. My number 3 is just going to be a general reminder that you're probably a week or 2 past due on picking up the backup running back who is the best fit for your team, right? This could be Dearness Johnson. This could be Rico Dowdle. It could be Elijah Mitchell. It could be Zach Moss. It could be Ty Chandler. There's somebody out there that you should probably be picking up, because we're at the point in the season when we're in like September and October, roster depth is a huge deal, and you've got all those bye weeks ahead, and you got to get through all this, and you've got all these injuries, and we want to have deep teams. We don't care so much about having deep teams when we get in December, right? We want to feel great about our starting lineups, and then we want to know that we have plug and play options behind them. So this is the right time for those understudy running backs. My number 4, because I don't have 5 guys that I feel great about this week. My number 4 is a defense. I would go ahead and pick up the Rams if you're streaming, because they get the Cleveland Browns this week, and that means either PJ Walker or Joe Flacco, or that DTR looked great for a minute in the Browns Broncos game, but obviously came away with a concussion. There are no right answers at quarterback for the Browns right now, so I think any defense that gets to play them is in a pretty good spot. And then my number 5, we talked about him earlier, Gardner Minshew. That is the gem of the free agent quarterbacks right now. He's out there in about 85% of Yahoo leagues. He's kind of fun. He's coming off a 250-yard game. He's got friendly matchups coming up against Tennessee, against Cincinnati. He's got 3 rushing scores on the year. He's the guy who gets to throw to Michael Pittman and Josh Downs, so that's a good scenario. Good matchups. Obviously a problematic player, but I don't know if your quarterback is on bye this week, or if you're legitimately I don't know, you're the person who's tired of starting Lamar Jackson, you want to hit the waiver wire, go ahead, go get Gardner.
There you go. There's your moment. You're done with Lamar. It's Gardner Minshew time, baby. Yeah, he does get to throw to Michael Pittman, and my God, Michael Pittman is awesome. I'm so happy for the season Michael Pittman is having. I'll just throw out a couple of wide receivers too. If you're looking for spot starts or whatever, and you're truly desperate, Demario Douglas is still only rostered in 36% of Yahoo leagues, and he led the Patriots in receiving yards for whatever that's worth. It's not worth very much. It was only 49 yards. I know because I bet the over on 49.5 yards.
Oh.
And he got hurt on a punt return or whatever. So not loving that, but so monitor his injury status. They do get the Chargers this week. The Chargers are a joke. A.T. Perry was also benched because he kind of ran the wrong route on a play, but Chris Olave's got a concussion. Michael Thomas is on IR. Rashid Shaheed got banged up, so they might have to go ahead and throw to old A.T. Perry there. He might be a spot start type of player. These are the guys, again, if you are desperate at the wide receiver position, I'll just throw those guys out there. A couple rookies that I think have had a few moments. And just to heat check you on the great Gardner Minshew, greater than Lamar Jackson rest of season, would you rather pick up Gardner Minshew over Derek Carr or Kenny Pickett, who I think will be the other popular, and I guess Will Levis too against the Colts, other popular streamers?
Yeah, Pickett was the other guy that I wrote about, but I didn't really want to put it on my official record on the podcast. The problem for Kenny Pickett is the man has thrown 2 touchdown passes since September, man. It's God. Such a low ceiling offense. That's crazy. And he, there's been a couple of injuries in there, but he's played through them. 2 touchdowns since September. I just can't, the ceiling is 1 TD and 210 yards, right? So I just, that's a little bit difficult for me. I can't quite go Kenny Pickett, even though you can make an argument that the offense made some modest strides. And also, I feel like Deontay Johnson was robbed of a touchdown, but that's neither here nor there. But
so
again,
is he, clearly.
2 TDs since September, not great.
That's brutal. And obviously Derek Carr without Chris Olave is probably not that tempting either. So, all right, great. There's the moral of the story. Gardner Minshew is your top quarterback pickup of the week, and you should, if you're sick of Lamar Jackson, you should play Gardner Minshew.
There you go.
Over him. Well, Andy, this has been a hell of a show. I do, by the way, love your idea of the official record being what we say on the podcast. It's write an article. It's so much easier to write something disgusting, but to actually come on the show and be like, you guys out there, should pick up Kenny Pickett. That's a whole nother thing.
I can go back weeks later and still delete the paragraph that I wrote on Kenny Pickett and then just pretend that it never happened. But I can't take back what happens on this pod.
That is very true. And this is very serious business, clearly, as you heard. All right. Well, with that, it's another People's Panic Meter in the books. We'll definitely still do the coping corner because the coping corner is fun. We'll probably do some level of panic going forward. But since we're going to be post week 13 here this time next week and the fantasy playoffs are starting, we might tweak and tinker with this little podcast here going forward. But we'll still figure it out. We'll figure out how to get you people involved. You can still hit the mailbag. I do need more from you in the mailbag. I mean, come on. No submissions this week. I get it. You just want to send in your complaints about players. That's totally fine. Just send them in. That's what you're here for. Or that's what we're here for, so that you don't send them to Justin Jefferson's DMs and drive him off social media. I know nobody that listens to this podcast is the one doing that. I know that none of you well-adjusted, wonderful Yahoo Fantasy Football Show fans are the ones doing that. But there are other sickos out there behaving in this way, and it's your responsibility, if you're out there, to set a good example and tell your sick freak friends that are doing this to Justin Jefferson and other players that you just send them our email, okay? Send your sick freak friends our email and complain to us, and we'll deal with it on the show. But for now, that is going to do it. Ekeler's Edge is back tomorrow. We'll talk about Austin's recent performances and other things on that show. Until then, we are out.